At exactly 5:29 a.m., the New Mexico desert fell into a silence so complete that even the faint rustle of the wind seemed forbidden. No birds called, no insects buzzed, no distant vehicle hummed, only the tense figures of men and women dressed in the heavy coats and wrinkled uniforms of scientists stood rigid, their eyes fixed on the horizon where a small tower held the unknown. They were not simply performing an experiment, they were daring to confront the most dangerous force humanity had ever encountered, gambling with the entire planet on a question that no one had the courage to answer. What if we fail? It was 1945, the final year of a war that had already claimed tens of millions of lives across continents, leaving cities in ash and oceans in mourning. Nations had crumbled, families had vanished, and yet in the barren desert of Alamogordo, a different kind of battle was being waged, one fought not with bullets or bombs, but with the raw power locked inside the building blocks of matter itself. The Manhattan Project, as it was called, had brought together the greatest minds of the era, physicists, chemists, engineers, men and women whose ideas alone had reshaped the modern world, now united in the audacious goal of splitting the atom. To ordinary people, an atom was infinitesimal, invisible, harmless. To these scientists, it was a cage of unimaginable energy, a silent force that, if released, could rival the sun in a single instant. And now they were moments away from unlocking it. As the desert sky lightened, the scientists' minds raced through every calculation, every hypothesis, every worst-case scenario they had considered since the project began. Some of them whispered quietly among themselves, trying to hide the terror that clutched at their chests, while others stared blankly at the equipment, as if willing the machinery to behave differently, to obey their commands. The unthinkable possibility loomed in every mind. If the energy escaped in a chain reaction too powerful to contain, it could ignite the very air around them. The earth itself could become a fireball, burning oceans, forests, mountains, erasing all life. It was a terrifying thought, yet a small probability, mathematically minuscule, that did nothing to soothe the fear twisting their stomachs. Some scientists, in moments of dark humor, joked about their potential fate. Others wrote letters to their families, anticipating the worst, composing final words that might never be read. And then there was J. Robert Oppenheimer, the project's lead scientist, who paced silently through the tents, his mind a storm of equations, ethics, and dread. Sleep had abandoned him. There was no going back. Once the switch was flipped, once the fire was unleashed, history would split into a before and after. Night had barely lifted from the desert when a gentle rain began to fall, blurring the horizon and adding a surreal sheen to the sand and metal equipment scattered across the site. Lightning flashed intermittently, as though the sky itself sensed the enormity of the moment and attempted to warn the men and women below. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching and twisting in the lantern light as the countdown clock ticked toward zero. With each passing second, the collective heartbeat of the desert seemed to accelerate, pulsing through the veins of those standing watch. Scientists gripped clipboards, scribbled final notes, whispered last prayers, and held their hands to their mouths to stifle the tremors of anticipation. And then, in a way that felt both impossibly slow and heartbreakingly swift, the moment arrived. The countdown reached zero. In an instant, the desert was torn apart by a flash of light brighter than the sun, a white-hot surge that painted the sky in colors no human eye had ever endured. The ground trembled violently, sending sand, metal, and debris skittering across the plains. For a heartbeat, each scientist thought the worst had come to pass, that the sky had finally caught fire, that Earth had finally surrendered to the unleashed fury of the atom. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the fireball stopped expanding. The blinding light slowly faded into a mushroom-shaped cloud rising majestically into the sky, a pale smoke trail twisting like a giant ghostly sculpture. Relief crashed over the men and women standing miles away, but it was relief tinged with awe, horror, and disbelief. One scientist, voice shaking, whispered into the morning air, "It worked." As the clouds swelled, Oppenheimer could hardly speak. The famous words from the ancient Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita, echoed in his mind. "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." In that moment, he understood the terrible beauty of what they had created. They had harnessed a force that had existed since the birth of the universe, a power no human being had ever wielded before, and they had done so with nothing but faith in mathematics and the courage, or perhaps hubris, of human ambition. Weeks later, atomic bombs would fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending a war that had stretched across the globe and claiming tens of thousands of lives in a single instant. The consequences were immediate, unimaginable, and eternal. Yet that morning in the desert was the true genesis of a new era, the atomic age, an era where humanity suddenly discovered that it possessed the power not merely to wage war, but to annihilate itself entirely. The story of that fateful morning is a story of paradoxes, the mingling of genius and fear, innovation and destruction, hope and despair. The desert, once a place of quiet desolation, became the site of a revelation that would haunt every generation that followed. It was a lesson in both the potential and the peril of human knowledge. Science, after all, had no morality. It had only possibility. It was humanity that would choose how to wield it, wisely, recklessly, or catastrophically. That morning, the world did not end, but from that day forward, humanity carried within itself a knowledge both magnificent and terrifying. It now knew exactly how it could. The power to split the atom revealed a stark truth. The universe's forces, once untouchable and safe, could now be unleashed with a single switch, a single mistake, a single decision. And in the faces of those scientists, standing miles away from the epicenter, one could read the mixture of triumph and horror, the thrill of discovery and the weight of responsibility, and the quiet, unshakable realization that the world would never, ever be the same again.